Good morning and welcome back to another episode of CFL Summer Showcase Northern Lights. As always, I'm joined by Michael Washington, my trusty co-host, and we have a lot to talk about today because it's been a couple weeks since we've been on here. We've got rule changes, Nathan Rourke setting records, various other things that have gone on, including potential expansion eventually. So we've got lot to talk about. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and hit that intro video and jump right into it. Thank you all for joining us this morning. All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick it off right where everybody would fully expect us to with the rule changes. Obviously, this is the big news from this week in the CFL, and I mean, why not start right there? But before we get to that, Michael, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm good, my man. Good. Excited to talk about this because there's been a lot of talk about it for most of the week, and it's been very interesting to see some of the reactions that we've been seeing for sure.
I would agree. Honestly, I think I was a little surprised by some of the reactions. And honestly, I think you and I have kind of a similar view on this in terms of the fact that, there's certain things with the CFL you just can't really mess with it without, completely damaging the unique rule set they have. And, I don't feel like any of these rule changes that we're about to discuss really kind of affected the sanctity of the CFL style of play. And it kind of seemed like you were of the same thought process. But we'll go ahead and pull up the rules right here in case anybody has not seen them. Just a real brief synopsis on some of the rules that have come up. Basically, the goalposts will be moving to the back of the end zones. And with that, they're shortening end zones from 20 yards to 15 yards. And they're also shortening the field to 100 yards from 110 yards. So kind of all these changes from the goalpost perspective are all tied together. Obviously, you retract the field because of the move of the goalposts, and then the 15-yard end zone, same thing. You're kind of contracting the field size a little bit to make up for the change in the goalposts. And then the modified rouge, the rouge will no longer include a single point for a missed field goal attempt that goes wide of the goalposts. So this is something that I like as well, which we'll get into a little bit more, but it kind of avoids, winning due to failure. You miss a kick, you get that point, you win a game. That seems a little bit much. So I think that's something they're trying to fix. And then the teams being placed on the opposite sideline, that's just common sense. And then also the 35-second play clock will automatically start now. So just a quick rundown, and then we'll kind of get into each one of these rules a little bit more in depth. But which rule really kind of stuck out to you when these changes were announced?
Well, I mean, I think really realistically speaking, any time that you're looking at rule changes, that there's two things in the CFL in two things particularly in the CFL that I think are kind of sacred and kind of off limits, in my opinion, and that would be 3 downs and the width of the field. So I was a little bit off put by Commissioner Stuart Johnson's lack of commitment to 3 downs. He was asked and said he couldn't promise that it would never go to 4 downs. That starts getting into murky territory when it comes to changing the dynamic of the league, right? The CFL has been pride on 3 downs forever. So I was happy to see that those two things didn't change. Now, when we heard about these changes, you and I had discussed about doing a kind of like a reaction instantaneous show. But once we saw what the changes were, neither one of us felt that these really impacted enough of the gameplay to really warrant a special show, right?
Yeah.
And the one that sticks out to me the most would probably be the goalpost moving, because honestly, I fully understand why they're doing it from a player safety standpoint, but not just from a player safety standpoint. This out now opens up the middle of the field, which, if you think about it, with the goalposts where they were, yeah, there's only it's a thin bar that is in the U shape or whatever, but it kind of restricts. It almost acts as honestly a 12th or a 13th, 14th, and 15th type of like defender when you get down to that area, because it sits dead set in the middle of the field, and you have one on the left, one on the right, and then the crossbar, and you could even say the post that the goalpost sits on. So realistically speaking, the defense had a huge advantage with the middle of the field kind of being taken away when you get down in that area. So moving the goalpost back, I think, was kind of a necessity thing more than anything else, because now it does open up, and it causes defenses now to kind of play the entire field now instead of just being able to play just the perimeter. I also feel like this will also eliminate so many quarterback sneaks from the 1-yard line.
That's a good thought process.
I don't think a lot of people realize that how much this may change that dynamic, because now you have, I'm sure we'll still see some, but when you talk about the way that the CFL has operated, when you take away the middle of the field, the hash marks generally fall where the goalposts are, right? So like if you move that goalpost forward on that picture and you set it right there, look how much space that takes up on the end zone, assuming that you're going by a width standpoint, right? So you take that away, when you put the hash marks where it goes, where the hash marks are right there on the thing, and you take that and you go with it, you're talking about a situation where it's the entire middle section is basically regulated to, you have to run a run play if you want to score inside the hash marks. And the best and most effective way is being the quarterback sneak. But now you move those back, and I feel like it just opens up so much more. You can start running more drag routes. You can start running, out routes, in routes, stuff like that. And I don't think people truly understand how much more this field, or the field goal post moving back, is actually going to help red zone offenses in that sense. I completely agree with the commissioner's sense that there's going to be more touchdowns scored for sure.
Yeah. I think the league projection was 60 more touchdowns for a season, and obviously that's through the full entire season. But at the same time, 60 more touchdowns is a significant change. And honestly, you look at these graphics I just put up, and this is great data from the CFL to provide, to people like us that are trying to discuss these rule changes and really kind of understand exactly how it's going to affect the game. But you see right here, 44% fewer attempts than the right and 43% fewer than the left. And obviously, right, you're throwing right past the goalpost. So the pass has to be perfect in order to even make it to a receiver in the first place. And then you still have to deal with the defender and all that. So it's a low percentage play. But you look at it here, completion rate drops by over 20%, despite the fact that they're seeing almost half as many attempts. And that's insane. That's a huge dramatic drop. That I think is really going to change the game in a good way. I think it's really going to cause more points and only help the game be more exciting and less monotonous at certain points in time. So I'm excited about this particular change. I also, like you said, player safety aspect. To be completely honest, I'm shocked it took this long. I'm really
Yeah.
honestly, I don't understand it. I mean, you, for all people, if anybody knows, you know that like no other league in the entire world still had their goalposts up at the front of the end zone like that. And I'm talking Europe, Japan, Austria, all over the world had changed this, and the CFL had stuck by it. So it just seemed like a really weird thing for people to get upset about. But I get it. It's a significant change for people who have been, a fan of this style of play since they were, kids. But at the same time,
Aesthetically, Sam I think is the big key here. Like, it's more aesthetically pleasing on the eye when you're a football fan, especially if you're trying to gain more, expand your fan base. You see goalposts in the front, and people go, "What the hell is this? What bush league shit is this?" And I hate to say that about the CFL because it's definitely not bush league by any means, and that's not a shot at them. But anybody who's unfamiliar with the CFL, who is familiar with any kind of NFL, any kind of leagues in general, whether it's college, NFL, even if they grew up in Mexico or if they grew up in, like you said, Germany or Austria or Italy, the goalposts are all in the back of the end zone. So like you literally then start watching the CFL and you're going like, outside of all the CFL different nuances anyways, and then you see the goalpost in the front, you're going, what archaic landscape is this? Because let's face it, it's an archaic like rule, like to have the goalpost in the front. Like that's how it started. It's no longer where we are as far as the progression of football is concerned. So it was long overdue. I think Mike Mitchell was one of the first ones to make a post, that I completely agreed with was, it's been long overdue for them to move the goalpost back. And I understand they didn't want to do it with the 20-yard end zones because it makes the field goal, significantly larger, which and the only disappointing thing about this is if the league is definitely, or not disappointing, the league definitely took into consideration about how many more touchdowns this is going to create, because now if you kick a field goal from the 35-yard line, it's a 57-yard field goal with the 15-yard end zones. And I don't think people realize that either. So a lot of these games are no longer going to be able to be decided on a field goal from 55 yards because the goalposts are right in the front. Now you have to be a little more strategic with it. So I think if the league definitely wanted to try to increase scoring in a league that already has pretty good scoring, um, you know, they're gonna get their goal here, and I think we're gonna see a lot more creativity, especially in the red zone. And that's one of the things that the CFL, as much as I love this league, the CFL really lacks behind in other leagues is the creativity inside the red zone. It's why you see 17 freaking quarterback sneaks on the goal line every time it's on the 1 yard line. You know what's coming. And it's like let's open this up a little bit. Let's make this a little more aesthetically pleasing. And I think moving something as simple as moving the goalposts back, even if they had kept the 20-yard end zones and the 110-yard field, even just moving them back, I think would open things up significantly. So, as far as that change is concerned, I think that's probably the most significant, because I do completely agree with them that it is going to open things up and definitely make an impact as far as scoring and aesthetics. That's the biggest thing, is the aesthetic part of it, is going to drive, I think, a newer fan base, influx of fans coming in, if you want my honest opinion.
No, that's a good point of view, because honestly, that's something that I had really not considered entirely. But you're not the first person to bring it up either. I've heard people discuss that from a broadcast perspective for the announcers and whatnot. There are obstructions that for them that makes it kind of difficult for them to see certain sections of the play and stuff like that, which can make it difficult to call a game as well. On top of the aesthetics that you mentioned, for the fans' perspective. So I mean, honestly, I think that to me, this is just a logical change. And I know that, again, there's a lot of opinions one way or the other. And I'm sure there will always be until these changes take effect and it just becomes second nature for us to have it that way. But I wanted to add a little bit of context to this in terms of the red zone aspect. I recently wrote an article about this. It's up on ShadySportsNetwork.com. It's literally the first article you come to. But the CFL currently already this season has averaged roughly 9 points more per game than the NFL or the UFL has. And that's while having a longer field and then the goalpost right in the center of the end zones. So, I mean, if we're looking for, excitement big plays, stuff like that. I think moving the goalposts back is really only going to help the CFL take one further step past, the UFL, the NFL in terms of scoring and big plays, and might, even help kind of garner another chunk of an audience, because it's a little bit faster style of play, a little bit less. Drives don't drag as long, because of the two down situation. So I think this is going to be a good thing long term for the league. I think it's going to create a lot more excitement. Scoring is going to go up. And ultimately, I think player safety is really kind of the biggest thing from this that just makes sense. But moving on to some of the other rule changes, we'll go ahead and discuss the Rouge rule a little bit here. The way they tweaked the Rouge rule, now if you miss a field goal and it flies out of bounds, it is no longer an extra point. Same thing with a punt. I always thought it was weird that you could score points on a punt to begin with, to be honest, but this cleans up a little bit of that. And I heard somebody say it, and I wish I had written down at the time who it was, but somebody said we shouldn't be rewarding kickers for failure. So what are your thoughts on the Rouge rule overall and that aspect of it? I mean, were we rewarding failure before, or was that just a unique way to score points for the CFL?
I think it was a unique way to score points for the for the CFL. But honestly, the punt, any kick that goes out of bounds, I don't think should be rewarded for a point. I've always thought that, even with the old Rouge rule. However, I do love the Rouge rule as it stands. With if you voluntarily concede or get tackled and don't get the ball out of the end zone, right? Like I like that aspect because it does require a sense of, okay, if you don't get the ball out, you're going to concede a point. Now, 1 point, as we both know, numerous times, we see it every week, could go a long way. And I think that's one of the things that I do love about the Rouge rule is if you catch a field goal that's short, you should have to get out of the end zone, and it creates action, right? But kicking the ball out of bounds on one of the things is like a 23-23 game, and there's no time left, and the field goal kicker, misses the kick wide left, and the ball goes out of bounds. It's 1 point, and the game is over on a Rouge 24-23. Like, it doesn't even matter. If I was a kicker, I would just kick that thing as hard as I could, and just wherever it went, it went. As long as it went out of bounds in the end zone, I was going to win for my team, right? Like, so I like the fact that we're getting rid of that, even though I do like the fact that the Rouge rule exists, because I think it adds a different dynamic, to it. It was rewarding kickers for failures before, specifically field goal kickers, sure. But I think that if you have a ball land in the end zone, make it live and make sure that somebody has to get it out of there. If that's how we're going to roll with it, because I think that just adds a different dynamic to way to score. So, but I do love the Rouge rule as it sits with the voluntary conceding and all that stuff.
Completely agree on that. I think that, like I said before, rewarding for failures is a bit much for me, but I do like the fact that players have to advance the ball. It does kind of force some exciting plays at times. When a kicker's really good and he can hang the ball up there and kickoff coverage can get down the field quick, I mean, it makes for some exciting plays, or and also makes for some exciting returns at times that may not have happened otherwise. So as far as that goes, I like how they changed that. I don't think anything's wrong with their thought process there. These changes, I just, again, I don't understand why it didn't happen a long time ago. The opposite sideline thing is just insane to me that it took this long for the CFL to decide this was a good idea. And honestly, I'm curious, in your opinion. I mean, we've seen a lot of fights this season, some of which were due to the fact that these teams were so compact and close together on the sidelines. I mean, do you think the fights and all those actions by some of the players this season had anything to do with this, or is this just something that Stuart Johnston is, again, cleaning up something that should have been done many years ago?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely just a cleanup thing. Again, it's more of a aesthetic side standpoint, and I'm sure it will alleviate some of those, some of those fights and brawls that we see and all that stuff, because it's baffling to me, that it took this long. I mean, it's similar to the goalposts. But yeah, I think it's just a cleanup period. I don't know if it's necessarily something that, was, I don't know if it was necessarily something that was like pressing per se or whatever, but it just, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. Why it took so long anyway. So yeah, but that's completely fine by me as far as that's concerned. So we'll see what happens there. The 35-second play clock, another one that I really don't understand why it wasn't done beforehand. I get that with the way your timing rules are and stuff, but like when a play is dead, it's like move on to the next play, type of situation. I really don't quite understand why it took so long for that either. But though these two changes, I think, were just more for functionality. One was more of a, for the opposite field benches. I think it was probably more of an aesthetic slash functionality standpoint, and the same thing with the 35-second play clock. I think it's just more of a function, cleanup than anything.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, one of the points that I saw made about the similar sideline is the fact that at times during substitutions, players were running 60 yards plus to get to the play because they had to run around the other team up the sideline, to where their team was at on the field of play. So that's another thing that it cleans up, and it'll make substitutions a little bit cleaner, because then, a guy just has to get to the sideline and he doesn't necessarily have to worry about running around the other team, which is, just an added logistic factor that does not need to be there. Now that we've kind of discussed all the rules, I wanted to discuss some of the reactions that have been out there. And one of them that's been probably the most divisive by anybody was Nathan Rourke. And he had this to say. I mean, it's garbage. As many people did, fans and people who play in this league grew up watching the CFL and loving the game. Basically, he's saying that, the majority of fans and longtime CFL lovers are thinking these rule changes are garbage. And, I mean, maybe if you're watching and you're a Canadian fan, you can kind of explain to us why the thought process is that way. But what did you think about Rourke's comments?
Well, I mean, my initial thought process, and you mentioned it off air that somebody else had brought it up, but I think it was the Mark Cast, so shout out to him, as well. But my first initial thought was like, Nathan, that's kind of rich coming from you, who left the CFL to play in the NFL for a few years, and now you're mad that the game is aesthetically moving in a direction to hopefully garner newer fans, all because I'm not really sure. Like, like I just was confused. Like, he left to go to the NFL, and a lot of these changes are, more in line aesthetically with the game of football that you see across the world. And suddenly he has an issue with the rule changes. I don't think there's any rule change here that's garbage. There's nothing that changes the fundamental of the game. There's nothing here that changes the way that the game is played, as far as being able to have the high motion, the field's still long enough, wide enough. You still have 100 yards. You remove 5 yards. I'm totally. You're moving what? They're moving 15 yards. We're moving total, because they're shortening the end zones by 5 yards, and they're getting rid of the 55-yard line. So I don't really understand why he is. It sounds like it's a very I don't know, we're rich in tradition, like we don't want to change things type of like comment. However, I will say that if there's anything that you and I both know, CFL fans are very, very uh, dedicated to the game that's up north, and they're very they have some strong opinions, needless to say. They love the game for what it is and how it is, so it's not entirely surprising. I just don't know where Nathan gets off saying that they're garbage when he spent a few years down playing in the NFL, where he was so quick to leave the CFL to go play Americanized football, and if it's just that he thinks that they're trying to be the NFL, I don't view these changes as the CFL trying to be the NFL. That seems to be one of the biggest arguments for a lot of CFL fans is, oh, we're just going to become the NFL now, and I really honestly don't think that that's the case. So I'm not really sure what his thought process is and where he's coming from, but I don't know. I don't think this changes the fundamental of the game at all.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was kind of surprised to see his comments in the first place. Again, because, okay, first let's back up a little bit. So before the rule changes actually came out, there was a rumor going around on Twitter, and anybody who really follows the CFL, guys like Dave Naylor and some other people were reporting on the quote unquote Americanization of the game.
Yeah.
So my thought process was, in hindsight now, looking at it, I feel like that part was probably leaked out there on purpose in an effort to try and make fans think more dramatic changes were coming, to try and downplay some of what actually did come about. And because when I heard that, my first thought was, oh, they're going to allow more American players. There's going to be a ratio change. Or, a lot of people thought it was 4 downs. Maybe we're going to go to 4-down football. Something like that, where it's actually closer to the American style of play, which, I mean, I get, obviously, 100-yard field, that is a little bit closer. Moving the goalpost back, that as well. But to me, this is not an Americanization of the game. This is just kind of much needed changes that were long overdue. So, I mean, if like we talked about earlier, if you had changed the width of the field, if you had taken away the 12th guy, if you had added a 4th down, I could see the uproar.
Sure.
But there's literally a petition going around right now to prevent the CFL from making these changes, and it's already got like 3,000 some signatures. Well, I mean, obviously they're 90,000 plus short before they ever do some damage with that thing, but
because I think that it's like outside of a small core group, like it's the minority that is the loudest. We hear it all the time. The minority is usually the loudest, right? And in this case, all these fans that are in the uproar of the changes, like they're the minority here. I think a lot of people understand that this isn't necessarily an Americanization of the game. It's catching the CFL up with the rest of the world. Like, yes, American football is American football. It's called American football for a reason, because we here in America used football as basically our sport that we chose and created here. So everybody else is obviously going to mimic that as far as field size, play wise, for the most part. CFL didn't do that, right? And for years they didn't do that. But none of these changes that are happening are fundamentally taking away from the foundation of the CFL. The only thing that they're doing is making it aesthetically more pleasing, and if anything, moving the CFL forward in the world of American football that, let's face it, is getting bigger on a world level, a global level. Like, it's getting much larger, and the NFL's influence, I'm sure, has a lot to do with that, because they're internationally expanding as far as more games being played. But I mean, Mexico, the LFA, which I cover, just announced that they had their largest viewership ever in last year. Germany, the GFL, and the ELF, which is now going to be the EFA, like those guys are all seeing more and more viewership numbers increase. The more that we're seeing the global realization that this is a good sport. The CFL is now just visually putting themselves firmly in that spot, and they can actually sit back on their rich history without slapping that history in the face. It's not taking tradition and spitting on it. It's taking the tradition and improving on it, in my opinion, in this case, because the fundamental function and foundation of this sport in the CFL up north, north of our border, isn't changing at all. It's literally just improving upon that foundation. And that's how I view it.
Well, you're not alone in that thought process either. And I mean, here's an opinion I feel should matter. I mean, Milt Stegall is, probably one of the premier players that everybody thinks about in CFL coverage at this point, or former players now in CFL coverage. And he said, to those who believe the CFL need not change or evolve, such a mindset would lead to the demise of our great league. And he's said several other things. And honestly, he's been one of the real staunch proponents of all these changes out there on Twitter that have kind of been having that debate and really kind of pushing the envelope in terms of why we needed these changes, which I was happy to see because, to be honest, I follow a lot of former players that kind of cover the league at this point, and a lot of them are really kind of up in arms about these changes, and it's surprising. I think I'm blanking his name at the moment. He's a former offensive lineman for Hamilton. He was likening it to the MLB, and he said, "Oh, the MLB has a bunch of end zones, quote unquote, that are different sizes. So we're gonna have to send Stuart Johnston down there to fix the MLB now, since his job is done in the CFL." And it's just like,
That's a terrible comparison. That is so bad.
yeah, exactly. Like
That is terrible. What is he even talking about?
yeah. I mean, there's been some interesting takes, that's for sure. So I thought it was awesome to see Milt out there kind of championing the positive changes for the league, because I think they kind of need that at the moment. They need some former players on their side saying, "Hey, no, this is needed. Our league is struggling, or not struggling, but it's stagnant."
Let's face it. They've plateaued over the last few years. There was a lot of talks about them operating in reds, or a lot of teams operating in red. We don't get a lot of the financial stuff. It's not released publicly, so it's much harder to generate this. But when you talk about certain things like Saskatchewan, what was it last year? 2.3 million, was it? It was something like that. They were operated 2.3 million. Like, think about in the grand scheme of football how little 2.3 million really actually is. And this was championed out there as like some kind of big improvement. It was great to see. Don't get me wrong. It's anytime you see that kind of improvement, it's awesome. But 2.3 million in a league that's been around for 100 plus years, right? Like, you think about it in that scheme, like how much of this was financially stagnant, as you said, or plateaued. This gives the chance for the CFL to finally catch up with the times and evolve to a situation where it can kind of become sustainable. One of the other subjects that we're going to talk about a little bit later, I think, might be directly linked to these changes, if you want my honest opinion. And
Yeah,
I think you know where I'm going with that. So,
yeah.
like, I think it might be directly linked to it, because I'm sure the CFL and Commissioner Stuart Johnson has had conversations with people surrounding, like, okay, what can we do to get you interested? You know what I mean? So I honestly believe that this is actually going to help sustain and actually maybe even put CFL solidified itself as a not in, not not right away, but I think will definitely put themselves solidified as the number 2 in the world, where they may have been losing their grasp in the next few years if they hadn't have made these changes now. Let's just put it that way. So,
I think
like,
that's a fair point.
like if they hadn't have made these changes, and these are the small changes that they're making, right? Like, everybody thinks that these are big changes. Like, these are the small changes they're making, and these small changes are a big enough of an impact that I think it lays, and like I said, it adds on to the foundation of this league. Like, you're not taking anything away from functionality. It's still going to be the same football. It's just going to be aesthetically more pleasing, and it's going to open things up for creative defenses, creative offenses, and better red zone play.
100%. And let's not discount that 10-yard shortening field too.
Yeah.
Some of these drives that might stall out, they might end up in points now, So I mean, like, that's another thing on top of this is I think ultimately it's just going to result in a lot more scoring. And I mean, not that they necessarily need more scoring, but it's not going to hurt the excitement of the games.
No.
And if we see a lot less punting because of it, or a lot less missed field goals or whatever it may be, then I'm okay with that. But on that note, let's go ahead and kind of pivot to the other conversation that you were kind of prefacing there. 3Down Nation recently put out an article that says the CFL commissioner has been contacted by Canadian and international groups looking to expand into the CFL. What's your thought on that? I mean, is it surprising to hear?
Not after the hearing these changes. It's not surprising. I mean, let's face it. Like when you're taking a look at the CFL, right? Like one of the hardest things that's been expansion-wise has been stadium construction, and obviously money is a big issue too. But when you now look at a league, if you are a football enthusiast that looking to expand into a league, right? And you look at the worldwide global sport, you see Italy, Germany, Finland, Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, sorry, Slovakia, Mexico. You see all the end zones are 10 yards. The field goals are in the back, and then you look at the CFL and you see the goalpost in the front. It's a 155-yard field. There's 20 yards. You have all these unique nuances and rules. You're less likely to invest in a league that's kind of not grown. Let's face it, the CFL hasn't grown. There hasn't been an exponential influx of new fans over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years that has expanded the CFL to this large, large scale thing. Yes, it's probably fairly well rich in the CFL. I mean, in Canada, but even in Canada, it's not like they're putting up NFL type numbers in Canada. You know what I mean? So you're not growing the league. And if your idea is that you need to grow the league, when you take a look at some of the changes that are being made, now you're looking at, okay, 100-yard field instead of a 155-yard field. Sure, you still have the width, right? But now you have the field goals, the end zones are a little shorter. You have more of an aesthetic 100-yard type game. You have the goalpost. Oh, the scoring is going to be good. That's going to increase, so like as an investor, if I'm looking to expand a team into this league, you're now moving forward to line yourself up with the rest of the world, not just America, the rest of the world when it comes to football, American football on a global scale. So yes, that's automatically going to be like, okay, if this is what it took for us to get this interest, then these were changes that need to be made.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And honestly, it has kind of been talked about on Twitter as well. I think it was Rod Peterson that pointed out, like, hey, shrinking this down to 100 yards and making the end zone distances a little bit more reasonable, all of a sudden opens up that ability to expand into American stadiums, or that was kind of the assumption, but realistically, any stadium at that point, because that's the norm for the dimensions of the field. And
Correct.
You already have to contend with the fact that it's a wider field. So, some stadiums, most likely they all would have enough room, but some stadiums it might be a little bit cramped, right? So there are some things that I think that definitely helps teams that would be looking into, potentially owning something in the CFL. And then on top of that, they already have that aspect of our game's a little bit different because we have 3 downs and 12 men and all that. So it's not like it's completely blending in with all of the rest of American football either. So,
Correct.
I think these are good changes. I think it's a positive. I think, like you said, it's probably going to attract more interested groups in expanding. And if that's the case, then it's a win for the league, right? Because at the end of the day, you need more ownership groups in the league to even it out schedule wise, and then also on top of that, just to bring in some more influx of capital, some new ideas, some potential hope for growth in the league, and we're not trying to bash on the league by any stretch. Obviously, we're here because we love it and we love watching games, but so every league could use some positive change, and I think this is all positive change.
And one of the other things that this has done is it's driven interest inside the league, right? Like you're talking, like it's brought eyes onto the CFL, and even if there's small change, even if the changes aren't as impactful as I think people were expecting, there's still changes that are going to impact the game overall. So you bring eyes in, and when you have a league that's been around for as long as it has and has kind of been stagnant or very, there's been very little growth. There hasn't been a ton of growth in that sense. What's the best way to do something? Well, you make changes, and the next thing you know, you have investment people, people that are want to invest in the league and expand. Expansion gets people talking, especially when you're in a 9-team league, right? Like this league has been 9 teams for as long as I can remember, for the most part. They've been talking about a 10th team for how long now, and it's never come to fruition. So Like, we have 9 teams. There is so much room for growth in the CFL. And now you have that opportunity because, like you said, these changes fall in line more with what's happening on a global scale. And when it comes to stadiums, from a logistics standpoint, it's probably better from a logistics standpoint to look at it from that perspective. So I am excited to see what happens. But if you do these changes and the next thing you know, in 2 years, you're announcing a 10th franchise, that's growth. That's growth for a league that has not grown in years. So
I like that thought. I mean, obviously we're sitting here talking about the changes right away, and none of these even take effect till next season, right? So, in a 2-season period, we could potentially see expansion, and then all of a sudden that changes the entire lens of what we're talking about right now. So I think that's a really valid point and something that honestly I hadn't put a ton of thought into until that article came out from 3 Down Nation. And shout out to them for being on top of it. They are really on top of some of this stuff that comes out, and just making sure that they have some great coverage. So if you have not checked them out, which I would be shocked if you haven't, I would recommend it. I'm an avid follower of their stuff as well. But we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of switch gears and talk about some other the current event type stuff rather than spending the entire time talking about
the rule
just
changes.
the rule set. But it's significant. It's not quite as mind-blowing as I was thinking, but it's definitely the biggest topic of discussion right now. So
significant enough, but not, impactful enough, but not detrimental to the league.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I'd put it. But we'll be right back. Thank you guys all for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that like button. Also, we are cruising really, really quickly toward 3,000 subscribers. We would love to hit that number before next week if we can make it happen. So if you can jump over to the YouTube channel if you're not currently watching there and subscribe on Shady Sports Network, we'd really appreciate it and be a huge help in our growth.
Cool McCain.
You thought you wanted Gunther against Chad Gable, but you didn't. And I'm going to tell you why. Chad Gable would take everything that Gunther's done and bury it.
The Playmaker.
It was on site. AJ Styles walked out there, seen LA like, oh, okay, then LA Knight hopped out the car, let's go.
Break down everything in TNA, AEW, and all of the WWE programming. Join these two kings, monarchs of wrestling, live every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central on the Play Caller Sports Talk YouTube channel.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school.
Oh, wow.
This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I use to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
All right. Shout out to Current, one of our official banking sponsor of Shady Sports Network, the only bank we use for the network, actually. If you sign up and use our link, we both get a sign-up bonus. So would really appreciate that and the support that it shows us. But where do you want to go to next? I mean, there's a lot to talk about. We've got Nathan Rourke setting records. Got some transactional news.
We can start right there. I mean, we could start. I mean, he was part of our topic earlier, so we can just stick with Nathan Rourke and the records that he sets. Because I mean, let's face it, the guy's a hell of a player. So I mean, it's not like it's not like it's one of those situations where he's not a hell of a player and doesn't deserve the recognition because he disagrees with something. I mean, most passing yards by a Canadian quarterback. He beat the previous record of Russ Jackson, 3,641. He's at 4,170, and there's 3 games left we talked about earlier with BC?
I believe so, yeah.
So, I mean, he has a chance to go over 5,000, depending on how those games go. and that's incredible. On no matter what sport you're in, or what rule set you play, that's an incredible year for Nathan Rourke. So it's nice to see it. BC's had some issues this year, but they've been a very tough out, and they've played very competitively all year, and Nathan Rourke is a large part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations to Rourke for setting that record. And honestly, I'm surprised that the record was so little in terms of the yardage. But looking at the schedule for BC, I wanted to ask you, I mean, does Rourke hit 5,000 yards? I mean, we've got, the upcoming game there at home against Calgary, which has kind of been slipping a little bit as of late. They do not play week 19. They've got week 20 at home against Edmonton, and then they go on the road against Saskatchewan for the final game of the season.
Yeah, it's a tough schedule. It's going to be very tough for them to find a way, or for him to find a way to get there. But I think it's doable. I mean, if you take a look, Saskatchewan has already made the playoff. They're probably not going to, really go out and that might even be starters sitting there. BC might be fighting for a playoff spot at that point. So, he's at 4,100, we said. So realistically speaking, he needs, a little under 900 yards. So he has to average just about 300 yards a game here coming up. And I know that seems like, just 300 yards, but I think it's doable for a guy like Nathan Rourke, and it's pretty evident that it's been doable for the most of the year. So, I think he might hit 5,000. If you want my honest opinion, I think he'll go over, that 5,000 threshold. I don't know how far over that 5,000 threshold he'll hit, but if he doesn't, it's going to be very close. I mean, we're talking 4,900 and some change, at the very least, in my opinion.
I would agree. He's got 830 yards left to go in order to hit it. And for anyone curious, he has topped 300 yards 9 times this season in a total of, I think he's played 15 games. Yeah.
Yep.
So 9 of 15 games he's hit 300 yards, and there's been a couple games where he's topped 400. So if he rocks out one 400-yard game over the next 3, there's a real good chance that he ends with 5,000 plus yards this season.
Yeah, it won't be easy, but I think he definitely can do it. It will be definitely one of those things where we're talking maybe 4,900 and some change. But either way, it's going to be a hell of a season for him. Congratulations to him, and I'll even be honest and take it one step further. I think he has to be in conversation for obviously MVP or MOP. Sorry, of what they do up there. So.
1,000%. I mean, if you look across the league right now, every other quarterback's been hurt at some point. So, I mean, I don't really think that there's any player, specifically at quarterback, and that's just the position that I always go to for MOP, but I don't see anybody else that really even has a strong case to say they belong over him. So, in terms of that, I mean, he definitely deserves it. And realistically, from a CFL's perspective, this is like best case scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want a Canadian quarterback to be dominating the league and showing that Canadian players are just as talented as NFL or former NFL players and American players. So kudos to Rourke, who's been shredding it all season long. And honestly, he'd probably be damn near 5,000 yards if he hadn't missed the 2 games earlier in the season. So
yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree with that. So.
On that note, we can kind of pivot over to the transaction news. I only really have one on here, and the reason I put it on here is because I thought it was an intriguing move specifically. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have signed Jose Ramirez. The reason I put this on here, a lot of people may not even know who Jose Ramirez is, but he was actually a 6th-round draft pick in both the NFL and USFL draft in 2023. He played 2 seasons for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and then got released this past offseason, I think, after training camp, and was not picked up. So he decided to make the jump up to the CFL fairly early in the NFL season, which I thought was surprising, but kind of an interesting situation where he was drafted in the NFL, the USFL, and yet here he is beginning his alternative football playing career in the CFL. Any thoughts on that before we move on?
No, I think it's a great pick. I mean, and this is what the CFL needs, is a nice young influx of players that are going to come in and hopefully establish themselves for years to come. And I think Jose Ramirez is a hell of a player. I think that he's has a chance to really make a name for himself up there, which of course we always talk about how big branding is for people. So he can make some noise. It's late in the year as far as the CFL is concerned, but this reminds me of the PJ Walker move from Calgary last year, right? Like, you bring him in late, and then hopefully you have a mainstay on your roster for next year. So,
Absolutely. I mean, he's still in his mid-20s, and this is a guy who came out of college having, collected 20 and a half sacks in a 3-season stint and ended on a really strong note as a senior. So, I mean, he's a pretty quality pass rusher for them to get this late in the season. That's a huge addition, I think, that could definitely pull together this defense, which has had a lot of injuries on that defensive line. The next couple things to talk about are the playoff standings, so I can kind of let you take the lead on that one.
Yeah, I was before we got on air, sorry to cut you off there. Before we got on air, I was kind of like looking around and looking at teams that are probably, the playoff picture as it concerns. As it sits right now, Ottawa, Toronto, and Edmonton are on the outside looking in. It's going to be very uphill battle for Ottawa and Toronto specifically. I don't know what happened with this Chad Kelly situation. I'm very curious. I wish I was inside the organization or had some sort of connection to the inside of the organization to find out what the thought process there was with Chad Kelly. It feels like they fumbled that whole situation, and now they're on the outside looking in. And honestly, it's going to be hard trekking for them. The best record they can get is 8-10 with 3 games left, and right now every team that they're chasing for a final playoff spot already has 8 wins. So it really means they're going to need a lot of help. They're mathematically not eliminated, but they're mathematically eliminated. Same thing with Ottawa, 4-10. Dreadful year for them. They were hurt for a large chunk of the beginning half of the year and just never fully recovered. Don't really know what happened there. You're the Ottawa guy, and you've talked about how it might be time for an overhaul, and I don't see a world where it doesn't happen this year, or in the off season coming up. Edmonton's interesting. Better year than I think that we all expected. 6-9. They're making some noise. They have the best opportunity and chance to maybe steal a spot. I just don't know about the tiebreakers, because I don't think that they own enough tiebreakers to make a difference. It will be fun to see what happens with Edmonton, especially with BC kind of got a tough schedule moving forward, and Winnipeg being a little inconsistent at times. But I don't see any one of those 3 teams making enough of a noise to be able to get into the playoff spot. So, in my opinion, you're going to look like it's going to be 2 from the East Division and 4 from the West, would be my guess. So, I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't think that there's any one of those teams that you think probably could make a move either. But if it could be anybody, probably Edmonton.
Yeah. I mean, Edmonton as of late has looked really strong. Their run game in particular is something I always look to, because Justin Rankin, whether he's catching the ball out of the backfield or just being utilized as a running back, he's been dangerous as of late. So I think that bodes well for them down the stretch. I mean, obviously we're getting into the nitty gritty. You got to be able to run the ball to find success in the playoffs and keep your defense fresh. So I think Edmonton has the best chance of the 3 bottom end teams here. But if you sat here and told me, 3 weeks out from the playoffs, that it was going to be Saskatchewan, Calgary, Winnipeg, BC, Hamilton, Montreal, I would not be shocked at all. Right now, those seem like the teams that have kind of been consistent enough, although you can kind of see here on the standings, which it's kind of interesting to look at this deep in the season now, but a lot of these teams have cannibalized each other all season long. Calgary, Winnipeg, BC, Montreal, they've all kind of been hit or miss depending on the week on how successful they were, or how they were able to move the ball, due to all the injuries and stuff that they've dealt with. So with all that being said, I mean, really, I think Saskatchewan is kind of the cream of the crop right now, and the one team that to me looks like a favorite. And actually, it's kind of funny that we're talking about this, because I'm not sure if you saw it, but recently there was a graphic going around circulated by the CFL that BC has the highest odds of winning the Grey Cup right now at 8-7.
Yeah, I did see that, and that's because of Nathan Rourke. Every league that we ever cover, it always starts with the quarterback. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, it makes sense from a standpoint of you need a quarterback to be able to function the offense. And Nathan Rourke, even though the team is 8-7, would, with the way that he's played, you would assume that would, I guess as the favorite, even though I don't think they're the favorite personally.
Yeah, I just think that's a crazy stat to have. I mean, and yeah, maybe it is because of the quarterback, and Rourke is great, don't get me wrong, but if you're sleeping on Trevor Harris, you might want to look back into his background a little bit, because he's won a couple Grey Cups, and to my knowledge, Rourke has yet to. So that might be something to keep in mind. But I did want to throw something out here that I think might be something to watch, and I'm sure people are fairly aware of this. But if Ottawa does make a move, I think you really honestly have to wonder if Rick Campbell's not the guy again. He's been the head coach there in the past. He was brought back this offseason as the special teams coordinator. It'd be a pretty easy transition to, sweep Bob Dyce out, blow up the staff and let Rick Campbell kind of assemble a staff in his image. I know his record probably isn't the most pristine. He's 82, 92, and 2 as a coach in the regular season, but he's also been to the playoffs 7 times out of a total of 10 seasons as a head coach in the CFL. And he was also the last man to bring Ottawa a Grey Cup victory in 2016. So I think Ottawa fans would be very happy with that hire. And, I don't think that we need to hold his time in BC against him per se. He's found a lot of success, and I think he could do it again, given the opportunity in the right situation. But it remains to be debated if Ottawa's the right situation, I suppose.
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens there. I mean, we don't know if it was coaching or if it's just roster personnel or whatever. I mean, we'll have to see what happens moving forward. So
Agreed. Kind of moving on to some of the other little bits and stuff, and I don't know if we've talked about this yet this season, but this is something that one of my colleagues or former colleagues at News Hub brought up. Chris Jones, former Edmonton Elks head coach, who kind of spent some time with Hamilton last season after he was let go, is now currently an assistant on Bill Belichick's staff at UNC. I know he had kind of had some ties to Belichick before, but are you surprised to see him at the college ranks currently? Not
really. I mean, with the way that Bill Belichick assembled that staff, I'm not really surprised, especially considering his and Jones's connection. Make no mistake about it. I mean, Jones was a lot of things, and I think Jones is a good coach. I mean, I don't think he's a bad coach by any means. I think he was a little bit out of his element as a GM, similar to how Belichick was in New England, in the later years. I just don't think Jones is a GM type of guy. And I understand wanting control over personnel decisions when you're a head coach, but at the same time, as a head coach, you should be willing to be able to coach and adapt to what the team is presented in front of you. But considering his ties to Bill, I'm not really surprised that he's down there. And it's been very tough for them this year. We'll see what happens moving forward, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody was quite hoping for the results they've gotten so far from Belichick down there in UNC, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day.
Different show.
Yeah, absolutely. One that I am not a part of, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, let's put it that way. On to some more somber news. I mean, obviously, we never really want to discuss this part of the sport or the negativity surrounding it. But as of late, there have been a couple of significant deaths surrounding CFL people. And the most recent one is extremely sad. Larry Thompson, the owner of the Edmonton Elks, has passed away a little over a year after purchasing the team. I don't want to be callous or kind of disregard the fact that we just lost somebody who seems like a great person. But I'm curious to get your take on what this could potentially mean for the future of the Elks. I mean, do we see a situation where, his family takes over? Do we see a situation where potentially the team's back up for sale, no less than 2 years after he purchased it? Or do you even have any inkling of what might come of this as of yet?
I'm going to assume, and I know what assuming does. It makes an ass at everybody involved, but I'm going to assume that he probably had a contingency plan in place in case something like this happened. He was young. He wasn't very old. Was he 65? I mean, that's not very old by any means. So I'm sure that there's probably some slight panic to start off with inside the organization, but I'm sure he had people in place that he trusted. I'm sure there's people in place that trusted him or that were close to him, and they have an understanding. They have an understanding as to what he wants and what his wishes were, and I'm sure that there's something there. It's a very sad time for Edmonton, and my heart and thoughts and prayer. Well, I don't pray, but my best thoughts and my best energy and stuff goes towards his family and the Edmonton organization at this time as well.
Sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely agree. There's a few times in life where you can kind of look at somebody passing away and think of it as, any sort of positive, obviously. But one thing I do want to say is from all reports that I have read about Larry Thompson, obviously I've never had a conversation with the man or anything like that, but he was a lifelong Edmonton fan, since he was a kid. And he got the opportunity to not only be involved with the team, but to own the team that he grew up as a kid rooting for. So I don't know, for most sports fans like us, that's a bucket list item. So at least he got to live out something that was probably a dream of his before he ultimately passed away. And I'm sure, at first it was probably hard to look at it that way for his family, but I'm sure his family takes some solace in that as well. He got to live out something that was probably a dream for him, before he ultimately passed away. And again, sad situation. I wish him and his family and all of that nothing but the best. Never want to lose anyone, let alone someone who seemed to be, for all intents and purposes, a great person. So the other piece of news about somebody passing away was a couple weeks ago, and honestly, we did not address it because I don't think we had a show that week. But Ted Gueva, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, the former GM for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, has also passed away. I think he was a little bit on the older side. He has since stepped away from the league a couple years ago and has been retired, but obviously he has now passed away. And there was a big event at the last Hamilton home game. I forget, I think it was Toronto that they played, but it was another team he had been involved in for a long time, and they both had the ability to honor him at the same game, which was really cool to see on TV. Overall, any thoughts about that loss?
No, same thing. Family and organizational, best energy and best vibes to them, and send them my best thoughts. And difficult anytime you start dealing with death and impacts and stuff. So my best wishes to them as well, and hopefully they could find some peace that he was impactful in their lives.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that's all the subjects we've got for today. Were there any final thoughts or anything you wanted to sneak in here before we get out of here for the day?
No, I think that's about it. For NFL, real quick, fantasy news. If anybody has Jalen Warren on their team, he is out for today. The game starts in about 10 minutes to get him out of your lineup if you're listening in a fantasy guy. Other than that, not from a CFL standpoint, go Calgary. Hopefully you can bounce back.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody who tuned in this morning. Always love doing this show, and I know we've been kind of sporadic with it as of late, but life's been crazy for the both of us, and we're trying to get everything back under control as far as that goes. But if you are a fantasy football nut, we've got good news for you because another show just kicked off here at Shady Sports Network literally about 15 minutes ago, and that is Shady Sports Fantasy Reports, hosted by LaCedric Green. So if you need any last-second advice to make sure you get your team set up early and make sure everything's squared away for you to win your matches this week, tune into Fantasy Reports right here on Shady Sports Network. No matter where you're watching, he should be live there soon. And then on that note, we're going to play you out with a quick commercial and then a promo about that show.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
Yo, what's good? Cedric the bus driver here. I don't know about you guys, but I know what I will be doing every Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And Thursday nights too. I'll be over at Shady Sports Network, so catch up with me. Holla at your boy.